Hello and welcome to West Country Wanderings. Welcome to another one of my Canal series. In fact, this is the second part of the secrets of the Thames and Severn Canal. I'm here at Brimscombe, about 2 miles away from the town of Stroud in the southern part of the Cotswolds in Gloucestershire. And we're going to be looking today at a particular secret of this canal in terms of boat building. Yes, not a topic that we've really touched on that much on the Canal series here on West Country Wanderings, and it all happened just a little bit further along at a place called Hope Mill. Just further along here is Stroud Brewery site, and a lot of this area of the Thames and Severn Canal has been beautifully restored. Lots of clearance of the towpaths. It's a wonderful place to come. Let's go and have a look at where it all happened at Hope Mill. Now you'll notice here at the Hope Mill lock site, I'll explain more about it in a minute, that the canal has been completely infilled. In fact, this is the end of the current navigation from Easington through Stroud past Thrupp. You can't get past here at the moment, but there's lots of plans to restore it, but that's for another day. Anyway, we're going to continue along there to where Hope Mill lock once was. Now Hope Mill itself is just in front of me. I'll insert a photograph that I took recently of that. And there is the towpath there, and this is the lane that comes up from Hope Mill Park. And that there is the yard itself. It was just around about that location was once the site of Hope Mill Lock. I'll insert an old photograph of that now because it's really difficult to envisage what it used to look like at this location here next to what was the Thames and Severn. Hopefully it will be once again. Let's have a closer look. I'm currently at the front of Air Plants Limited, which closed I think a couple of years ago, company based in Leicester, but they're part of our story too. I'll become clear in a moment. But this here was the site of not one, but two boatyards, or rather two separate companies. What's going on here and what do they make? Let's have a look. Now the two companies were called Edwin Clark and Abdullah and Mitchell, and I'll explain why that slightly strange surname of the second company later. Edwin Clark set up the boat building company here in 1878. He was the son of a lead merchant from Reading, some miles, about 60 miles to the east of where I currently am, in the county of Berkshire. And he did his apprenticeship for a company called Hayward's over at Abingdon-on-Thames, which we've covered previously in Oxfordshire. He wanted to strike out on his own, and we're not quite sure why he chose this location at Brimscombe. One of the reasons, of course, that he saw that the connection of the Thames and Severn Canal. Maybe he spotted the Wilts and Berks Canal connection into the River Thames at Abingdon and thought, canals, boats, of course they go together. And he used the transport of the Thames and Severn Canal to get out the finished product. The boats once made here on this site at Hope Mill were transported along the Thames and Severn Canal to Sewell Junction and then either down to Sharpness or up to Gloucester. Mainly down to Sharpness because a lot of the boats were for export, as we'll talk about a little bit more in a bit. Some of the boats though were actually used on the River Thames themselves. They were small pleasure craft, but the other ones were a lot more substantial. In 1878 there was already an engineering base here at Brimscombe. Indeed, this has been a hive of activity for engineering right in the heart of the Stroud valleys since the end of the 18th century and going back further. It's also the location of Hope Mill itself. Again, I'll insert a shot of that because that comes again into our story, all these things linked together. 6 years later, Edwin Clark took over the site here and started building his boats. They were fabulous boats, absolutely tremendous boats. And later on the video, I'll see if I can find his grave because he's actually buried in Brimscombe churchyard. So we'll see if we can have a look at that. But yeah, so this is the stretch of the Thames and Severn here. The bit I'm standing on now is the infield section, all the way carrying on to Brimscombe Port, which of course was our transshipment point. But the Severn Trows could also get along here because the locks were made wide enough for the Severn Trows and the Thames barges because of the interconnection at the Brimscombe Port rather than Warbridge in Stroud, where the Stroud Water and the Thames and Severn canals once met. Now, because there isn't a great deal to see at this site itself here today, I'll insert some old photographs so you get a feel of what it looks like. The first photograph I'll show you was actually taken in 1885, and the boatyard itself is on the left of the picture. It's an amazing picture. You can actually see part of the Hope Mill lock in it as well. Edwin Clark's house itself is actually just on the left of the picture, so that's included, and reason to believe that he had that built for himself. The barge in the foreground of the picture is Perseverance, which was owned by James Smart of Chalford. In fact, we've come across another Perseverance, haven't we? When I was filming that, doing boat trips, which still run in the spring and summer months along the Cotswold Canals Trust, both from Ebley and from Warbridge. This next picture shows the boatyard before it was bought by Mr. Abdallah. Mr. Clark still owned it, and it was around this time that he entered into a business agreement with another engineering firm called Sissons of Gloucester. It was a very, very thriving business and employed lots of people locally in Brimscombe and beyond. And it was wonderful to have this canal connection to use to get the materials in and to the final finished product, the boat, out. Another image for you shows an Edwin Clark paddle boat here at Hope Mill Pound in 1893. It gives you a flavour of the sort of boats that were constructed here by Edwin Clark boat builders. Now, it was around this time that our second person came into the picture, one Isaac Jacob Abdallah. He was actually born in Corfu in 1874. He was the son of a Turkish merchant. Merchant connection keeps cropping up, doesn't he? And he then went on to study. He went on to study in Manchester. In 1878, he became naturalised British. By 1891, he was attended Manchester Technical College, where he was learning all about engineering skills. Of course, later on, he put those skills to really good use. Now, the bit Mitchell is a little bit confusing because Mr. Abdallah bought a company called Mitchell, should I say, based in the Manchester area, who made textiles. Mr. Mitchell himself didn't actually ever work at the boatyard here at Brimscombe. Mr. Abdallah actually lived in Manchester, but travelled frequently to the site here at Brimscombe to oversee the boats that he made. He also had a site in Manchester making boats as well. I'll include a couple of photographs now so you get a feel of what Abdallah and Mitchell's boats were like, because they were quite different to the ones of Edwin Clark's just a few years earlier. The next image shows a boat actually being launched into the canal after it being built. It was an Abdallah and Mitchell boat, and it was a harbour service launch boat built for the Admiralty here in 1915. And here is an Abdallah and Mitchell steam tug, Nasaba, in 1927. It's 3 years actually before Mr. Abdallah passed away in Blackpool, we believe. I think he's buried up in that area, not here in Gloucestershire. So this is one of the other boats that was sent for export into the African continent. there is a bit of a mystery surrounding the boats built here, one boat in particular, and that was connected to a film, a very famous film that probably many of you watched, and that film is The African Queen, starring Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn. I'll explain more about that and the mystery that surrounds it and this site here at Brimscombe. Well, I've just walked up from the bottom of the Golden Valley where the Thames and Severn Canal is to the Church of the Holy Trinity here at Brimscombe. I know that Edwin Clarke's grave is here somewhere, but unfortunately I can't find it. A lot of the gravestones here, very hard to make out. There's lots of lichen and the limestone's worn, so you can't make out a lot of the lettering. But he's here somewhere, and I also think one of the lengthsmen that was based around the docks there, boat builders yard should I say, at Brimscombe, is also buried here. Name escapes me, I'll put that in the bottom below. But great he had the local connection, and I do think his family's ancestors still live in this area, the Golden Valley. I've now come around to Goth's Orchard Lock and Goth's Orchard Lock Bridge, which has a siphon. That'll remain a secret in a separate episode here on the Thames and Severn Canal for another day. But I wanted to tell you more about our story about the African Queen and the boatyard here at Brimscombe. Now, unlike a lot of canals, the Thames and Severn Canal, as indeed the Stroud Water as well, are very fortunate that they have very extensive archive records. Most of those are kept in the Gloucestershire County Records Office in Gloucester. There's also extensive records in Stroud Museum, the museum and park, just nearby in the town of Stroud here. So we have lots of evidence to go on. There were two boats used during the filming of The African Queen, Livingstone and the boat The Queen of Africa. Now we know that John Huston was quite a prolific director. He was a bit archaic as well, but he wouldn't go to the lengths of putting his two main stars at risk, namely Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn. They were very, very famous Hollywood stars in their day. And all films have to undergo insurance, so he wouldn't have put them at risk. And what I mean by risk is actually using a steam-fired boiler on a boat. It takes some considerable skill to operate one of those. I don't believe that neither Humphrey Bogart nor Katharine Hepburn were expert in using a steam-fired boat on one of those boats and gone in Africa. So what actually happened? What we know from those records is that there was no boat called Livingstone or Queen of Africa made just further along the Thames and Severn Canal there at Brimscombe Boatyard. Also, if you have a look at the film, next time it's on television, or if you've got a copy on the DVD or can stream it, if you look very carefully, you can see that the boat is powered by an internal combustion engine, be it petrol or diesel. There's a couple of shots where you can see smoke coming out the side of the boat there. So it's very clear it wasn't steam powered that they used, for the reasons I previously mentioned. Commander L.G. Dennis was employed by the East African Railways as a marine engineer right up until he retired in 1971. In fact, he was their chief engineer, if you like. He wrote an extensive article about this in 1996, quoting his sources very, very carefully. He stated, quote, "The African Queen in the film was a railway marine petrol-driven motorboat of 14 horsepower, built in 1930. She was filled with a mock-up steam boiler and oily rags were burnt to produce the smoke." The other thing to say is that one of those boats used in the film now is on display in Florida, United States of America. I can't remember the exact location. There's also an interesting article on Grace's Guide all about this, and I'll link to both of those in the description of today's video. Now, after Mr. Abdallah died in 1930 in Blackpool, the business here carried on, but only for a few more years. Of course, as you follow the series, you'll know that this canal closed around about 1933 at that division, where one section carried on for a couple of more years. So the boat builders here couldn't use this canal any longer to transport their goods in and out. It continued on for a couple of more years. They actually used road transport. In fact, they reassembled some of the boats that they built down at Sharpness before they went on to bigger ships to be exported. But the whole operation came to a grinding halt in 1935. And sadly, there's very little to see other than the fact that the air plants was linked to the original Mr. Abdallah's business. The two are connected. But I've since recently researched, and you can see from the photographs that Air Plants has also since recently gone into administration. It was based in Leicester, but that's now gone too. So that's another slice of the history of the boat building here in Gloucestershire gone forever. There are, however, a couple of the boats that were made hovering around somewhere. Some of them are apparently in Brazil and a couple in Africa, but I haven't been able to track down any photographs of them. If you do know of anything like that, then please add a comment below. I hope you've enjoyed the secrets of the Thames and Severn Canal again, here on West Country Wanderings, next to the Thames and Severn Canal in Gloucestershire. There'll be another one in the series coming up soon. Till then, take care of yourselves, look after yourselves. All the best. Bye-bye.